Access 2007 Tables Part 1. In this nugget, we are going to create a table. It's our first introduction really to tables, so we'll spend a little bit of time going into Design View and creating all of the fields, and then also in Datasheet View. We'll also set a primary key because it's very important to have at least one field in your table that is unique. We'll also select data types. One of the big powers of using tables in Access instead of setting up Excel spreadsheets is that you get to categorize the type of information that you're holding within your tables, such as text, numbers, dates, currency, or even URLs. Then we'll add and remove records in our Access tables. Well, let's go ahead and launch Access. We can go to our Start menu, and it's pinned here to the very top of our Start menu. We are in the Getting Started with Microsoft Office Access dialog box. From here, let's open up a database that's already been created. We see under our Open Recent Databases our Zoo database. We have a nice table array here of animals and habitat and membership and vendors. We have a nice start here. We also have a couple queries, a form, and a report. What is it that we want to do? We want to create a table. So we go to the Create tab on the ribbon. And here are our choices as far as tables go. We have a bunch of different types of objects we can create, but our goal is to create a table. Now we could go to Table Templates. Microsoft has a couple suggestions for us. Preset types of tables with data types already created. We could go into Table Datasheet View here, but I recommend creating tables from Table Design View. It really gives you the most control over creating this table. We want to create a database so that we can order food for our hungry animals. We are going to make a food orders table. We always want to have at least one field that holds unique information, so that's going to be the first field that we create. What is a typical type of unique field? Well, an ID field. We're creating food orders, so let's do a food order ID. All right, I like to have my field names with no spaces because I can always go into the properties later and change the caption so that when typical people see this, there's spaces and it's more user-friendly to read, but the field names are very often used in code behind the scenes, some programming, some logic there, and I like to not include the spaces. It's kind of old school, but it is also systematic because I know when I'm typing the code in that I just don't have any spaces. And I think it's easier to read if you capitalize the first letter of each word. I'll press Tab on my keyboard, or I could just click in the data type area. What are my choices here? Text, memo, number, and so on. I'm going to press F1 on my keyboard. From here, I'll get some help that describes what each one of these data types are. Now, why do I care what a data type is? Because this describes the type of information that I'm collecting, and it makes it so I'm not collecting garbage into these tables. Text, this would be any type of letter, number, or symbol that I'd like to see as is. I can have up to 255 characters in a text type of data. Memo is a bit larger. I can have almost 64,000 characters in this type. It's not used quite as often as text, but if you do have an odd occurrence where you need to type in lengthy text, you can use the memo field. Number. This is pretty obvious if you are collecting numerical data, and generally numerical data is that you would potentially be doing calculations on, then you can choose the number field. Date and time, currency, these are straightforward. Auto number, you may not have ever come across this before. For example, my food order ID, I want it to be an auto number data type because I don't care what the number is. I want it to be a number, but I'd rather Access just take care of making sure that my food order IDs are unique. So each new record is going to be a sequential number incremented by 1. I could also choose this be a randomly generated number, but I like the idea of being systematic and having it incremented by 1. And by the way, random isn't a choice here, but you can go into the properties and choose that. Yes, no is a good data type if you have check boxes. A check in a checkbox will indicate yes, or no check mark will indicate no. Very good for something like in stock. OLE object, that stands for object linking and embedding. You can actually attach a file into your table. Here it says a Microsoft Excel spreadsheet, a Word document. Very often a graphic may be included within that table so that when you display it as a web page or a report, you can see a thumbnail of that image. Hyperlinks are another data type. If you'd like to include web URLs in the table, or if you have file names, the whole address, like the server slash the folder where a file is stored slash the name of the file, then you can use that as a hyperlink as well. It'll show up in your table and also in any objects that are based off of it, like forms and reports. So if it's a report and you print it out, can be a little bit helpful to see the path, but perhaps if you want to web enable your report or create a web form off of it, much more helpful there because users could really click on that URL and be led to that web page or file location. Attachment also is a way to include images, spreadsheet files, documents, and the like, and they use space more efficiently than the OLE object type. This one is a rather new data type. OLE has been around for a couple years. Lookup Wizard, we are definitely going to use this one. Because in Access you want to have tables that are related together, you can use a lookup wizard to find a value that exists within another table. It's very nice for users when they're entering information in forms because now they can have a menu that they can click and choose a selection instead of having to type in the value. It's very nice for database administrators as well because you're able to limit user inputs to what you want, what you consider legal because it's already included in a different type of table. These are the data types that exist. As indicated, food order ID should be auto number. So I'll go ahead and click auto number. I like to type a description as well. So this will be an ID number incremented by 1. And actually, I think auto-generated would give more of a description here because this description can appear for people on the status bar if they're in the table or in the form and their cursor is blinking in this field. So that gives them an idea, oh, it's auto-generated. I don't have to actually type that in. Let's continue with some more field names. Let's call this one food name. And our data type for that would be text, which is the default. It pops up automatically. Because you already understand description, I'm going to press tab and tab through that. Order date, another popular item that you would use. I press tab, I'm in the data type field, and I just want to show you, instead of using my mouse, I can just stay on the keyboard and be very quick here. Date and time, if I press D on my keyboard, it brings me to date and time. Now I can press tab to tab through the rest of those items. Quantity, this is another important piece on an order type of table. So quantity, I think that number would be the right choice here because I do want to do some calculations, so I'll select number. Now we're ordering food, so we should know which vendor it is that we're actually ordering this food from. So I've got field name vendor, and my data type could be text because I could just type in the name of the vendor here, but I already have a vendors table out here that's already been created. I'll double click on that to show you. And I'll double click here to auto size this so you can see. I only have 8 vendors, but they really are fantastic vendors and we haven't had the need to add any more. I'll close the vendors table here, and do I want to save changes? It's asking me because I auto size that column. Sure, I will. Well, I want to be able to select one of those vendors from that related vendors table, so my data type is going to be lookup wizard. I want to look up to a different field. I have 2 choices. Do I want to look up the column in a table or query, or do I want to type the values in that I want? Well, I want to just look them up. I could choose a table, a field from a table, a query, or both, I know it's a table and I know it's vendors. So I'll make that selection here and click Next. Well, which fields do I want to include in my lookup column? Generally speaking, what you're actually tying this to is a primary key in another table, which is the vendor ID, because that uniquely identifies that vendor. But as a user, when they click that drop-down menu, the vendor ID isn't going to really tell them anything except for a number. And as you know, it's much easier to see a word written out there so that you better understand it. So I've chosen two fields, vendor ID and company. I'll click Next here. How do I want to see these sorted? I would like to see them sorted by company because my users, when they're entering orders, are going to be looking through company instead of ID. It's just easier on them. I'll choose Next. Now here's something interesting. It's actually asking me how wide do I want them to be, and do I want to hide that key column? The key column was the primary key vendor ID in that vendors table. I don't think my users need to see this because they're going to be making decisions based on the name here. And this has actually given me a decent size. I could click and drag this out if I want them to be able to see all the text here. That's what that very first sentence was referring to. Well, I think this looks pretty good, so I'll click Next. What label would I like for my lookup column? In other words, what field name do I want? Vendor? That would be fine. I'll keep it vendor, although I could change it to be vendor ID, vendor lookup, anything like that. I'm going to choose Finish now, and it's saying, hey, this table is new. It does not yet have a relationship with the vendors table. Do you want this relationship to be created? I do, because I want to keep these in check. If I delete a vendor in the vendors table or add a vendor in the vendors table, I want to see that update in this food orders table as well. So I'll select yes. Now I need to give it a table name, and I'll call it food orders. Food orders. Okay. There's no primary key defined. Do you want to create a primary key now? Yes. Notice how I could say no, but it's best practice to create a primary key. And I'll bet it created the primary key here for food order ID because it makes sense for this to be unique. That is definitely the case. If I wanted to change that, I could select this row and make the change and either remove this primary key or add a primary key as a different field. So to change this primary key, this is on the Design tab. The primary key, if I click on it once, I've removed a primary key. I really would like it, so I make sure that this field is selected, this row, and I click Primary Key. There's my primary key. Well, let's go ahead and take a look. We will toggle into Datasheet View, but because I see that icon there, I don't have to take the extra time to click the pull-down menu. I can just click this. Oh, it's asking me to save again because I made that change. I removed the primary key and then re-added it. So food order ID, I'm going to double click to resize this. It says new because this is a new row. You can also tell because of that asterisk there. I'm going to press Tab because this is auto-generated for me. My food name, well, let's see. Bananas. We know we have a lot of animals that eat bananas, or maybe just a few. Or maybe that's just folklore. I don't know. I've never actually seen a monkey eat a banana. But maybe I just don't go to the zoo enough. So the order date. This is something new to 2007. I have this nice little date picker. I can click on that and choose a different date if I wanted to. I'm fine with that. Now, quantity. How about we order 50 bananas? Now, I haven't really specified. Is that pallets? Is that single units of bananas? I'm not sure. I pressed Tab, and now I'm in the vendor field. And look at this. I have the down arrow. I didn't have the down arrow in these because I hadn't set a lookup field. When I click this down arrow, I can select a vendor. I bet my tropical nutrients vendor sells bananas. And I can again double click here to resize so I can see this. Fantastic. So these are some basic fields that we have here. If I press New on my keyboard, Tab on my keyboard again, I go to the next record, and I do have a number 1 for my food order ID. If I press Tab again, I can type in another food name. All right, so I don't know. I think some animals like to eat chicken. So chicken, if I want to keep that same order date, I could type in a number, by the way. I could type in 5/18, whatever I wanted. I'm going to back out of that and show you a shortcut. By pressing Control and apostrophe on your keyboard, it copies down what was immediately above it. So 518 was above, Control apostrophe on the keyboard just displays that for me. How much chicken do I want? 25 sounds good to me. What vendor would I like here? Pressing F4 on your keyboard, by the way, will open up this down menu. I know when you're watching this, it's nicer to see the mouse, but I think as far as the real world goes and typing and being expedient in this, I really like to give you keyboard commands because sometimes it's a bit clunky to go from keyboard to mouse to keyboard to mouse, especially if you're adding information in there. Chicken is my food name. I think tastes like chicken would be the vendor for that. And notice my food order ID has been added on as the number 2. And down here I see I have 2 records and I'm on record 2 of 2. If I wanted to go, and now I'm on a new record 3 of 3. We only have 2 records here, so I could just pop back and forth. Eventually you'll have more and you can use these next records. This will take you to record 1. This will take you to the very last record that exists. This will allow you to do a new blank record. When I press that, naturally, I just go to row 3 here. We'll get more into how to navigate through all these tables in a little bit. I would like to add one more field. I'll go back to View here, and just for kicks, I want to show you a URL. So my field name is going to be vendor website, we'll say. Now my data type is going to be hyperlink. And I'll go back, I'll save it, and I'll go back to view. And I'd like to go to this record, so I'll just click right in. Actually, I'll click right here. I'm going to modify record 1. My vendor website here is www.tropical.com. And there it is. It actually shows up as the blue here. And if you were in a forum, you could click on that link and be launched out to Tropical's website. If you were in the table, you could click on that link and go right out to it as well. I want to caution you. We'll talk about this more at a later time, but generally speaking, your users will add data in the forums and they won't be specifically in the table like I am right here. The goal is just to get you situated with the table, but in the long run, it's best not to have your users go through the experience of typing right into this table, and we'll talk about reasons why at a later time. Did you notice when I flipped back to design view, it did not ask me to save, but anytime I make a change from design view, it asks me to save? Interesting, isn't it? When you are in datasheet view, as soon as you type a record, it is stored in that table unless you delete it. It's something that's really what happens with database behavior overall. You're in a field, you make a change, it's saved automatically. You're in design view because you're changing the structure, it's not saved automatically. Let's go ahead and close our food orders table. Do I want to save changes to the layout? That's a key point here. I'm doing the structural changes. Sure I do. Let's create another new table. I'll go to the Create tab. This time let's create one in Datasheet view. You might have noticed it says Add New Field here. So what field would I like to add? We're going to talk about the type of animals that we have. So we already have our ID field here, and oops, I'm actually going to double click up here to get access to field 1. And we're talking about animals, so we'll just call it species, and I'll take that S out of there. Species. What data type do I want for this? See, I can make my changes here. This is also something that's new to Access 2007. We did not have that before, and it's interesting because now you can really make structural changes to your tables in Design View or Datasheet View. I'm going to add another new field by double-clicking, and this time I'll have a description as my field. I'll press Enter to leave that. And what data type do I want for description? Believe it or not, I have a Word file that I'm going to link up so that people who access this can actually read all sorts of information regarding the type of animals that I have within my zoo. I can also modify names by double-clicking here. Instead of just calling it ID, I'll call it species ID because I believe that that's a little bit more clear for us since we are going to have all sorts of other IDs that exist in our overall database. So I'm going to insert an OLE object in the description. What's my species? First I'll fill this in. A Bengal tiger. Description. I'm going to right click here and choose Insert Object. Am I going to create a new file or do I already have it created? I sure do. And it's on my C drive and it's called my zoo directory. My zoo files directory rather. So zoo files. Okay. Actually, I'll just browse out to it then. Zoo files, and I'll select the file there. Okay, there it is. The problem was I didn't actually type in the name of the file, and it thought I was trying to hook that whole directory to it, which would cause other types of problems there. Because I have not checked link, it's actually going to take a copy of this file and store it in my database. If I checked link, anytime someone double-clicked to open up this file, they would actually be linked to the storage location of this file. So linking saves space. However, if this database is going to be transferred or moved to another location, it may cause you problems because that other location is going to try to link back to this original C drive here. I could also choose to display it as an icon. I'm going to leave it like it is because I would have to have an icon created and make a selection for it there. So it's processing here. My description shows me it's a Microsoft Office Word document. By double-clicking on it, look at that. I'm in Microsoft Word 2007, and here is the description of a Bengal tiger. I'm going to go ahead and click my X to close that, but isn't that nice? Now, I can really store any type of data in this database that's going to make sense. Let's do one last thing. We created fields by double-clicking. We could just continuously create fields. We can make choices regarding the data types. We'll get into relationships eventually in a different nugget because it's very, very important. Here's where, similar to Excel, if you've used it, you can insert columns or delete them. And I double-clicked, but I could also choose Rename to rename a field. I could create a lookup column just like I did from Design View. It's the very same wizard. I can do that from here. I can also add existing fields. When I click that, it says, okay, you know what? I've got another couple tables that exist out here in my database. Would you like to link a field that already exists? It's similar to doing that lookup column that we did here, but it's just a different way of doing that. So if I choose from here, I'm working on the species table. Oh, let's see, maybe I have a zookeeper's. I could choose a zookeeper ID from here, and it's going to say which fields contain values that you want included in your lookup column. So it's very similar to the lookup wizard that we just completed with the lookup column. However, it's really just allowing us to see in a nice view here what tables exist and what fields within those tables we can choose from. I don't really want to add another new field here. You may have noticed by just clicking, you get a new field. When I clicked here, as soon as I completed this field, I got this new field here. Of course, I could click the new field button as well to create a new field. And here it's just giving me a dialog box that's asking me, well, what type of fields would you like to insert into your table? Well, I think I could go from a template, or I could just go for my basic fields, and choosing number gives me a new number field that's going to have the number data type, and so on. What I want you to gather from this, because I've shown you a couple different steps on how to create it, is that you just have to really have a goal first, and then there are multiple ways that you can carry out the task. So first, figure out what fields you'd like to have in your table. Might take some research, might take asking people that work around you what they're expecting to see in the database, but you have to have a plan. So you figure out which fields you'd like in your table and which data types make sense, and then, which I'll show you in a later nugget, you go into the properties of each field and you can make certain specifications, like you want to see currency as dollar signs and with no decimal places. Little tweaks like that that we will surely get into. I just want you to feel comfortable with, have a plan, and then you can go in here and use your data sheet, or I'm going to close this because I've made all sorts of crazy changes to it. Or you can go into Design View, and right-clicking does allow you to go into Design View. And here is the Design View of the table. The last thing I want to show you is deleting a record from your table. I'm going to double-click on Memberships here, and I have 28 records. It turns out that Claire Barrett, member ID number 10, is no longer one of our zoo's members. So I'm going to delete this record. I could press delete on my keyboard if I'd like to. I can go up here to records and choose delete as well. So I will select delete. It tells me I'm about to delete one record. If you click yes, you can't undo. That is a fact. No undo when you're working with data. Just like tables don't ask you to save when you add a new record, it gives you the warning if you delete it, it's gone. If you delete it, it is gone. The only way you can get that back is to recreate it or restore it from backup. But as I'm about to show you, you can't totally recreate it. So I am going to click yes to delete this, and now Claire Barrett is gone. Number 10 is gone. I'd like to add a new record in here, so I can click here and select new. I'm at the bottom, and what was her name again? Barrett, B-A-R-R-E-T-T, tab, Claire, C-L-A-I-R-E. I'm not going to fill in the rest of that information, but look at that. She is membership number 29. I can't type in 10. I tried to type in 10. No way. I use a unique ID once. Once it's deleted, it's gone. I can't get it back. So if you have these IDs that are the basis for other records or other information in your database, you have to be very careful when you delete that information, because I can never bring her back with a membership ID of 10. I have her back in there, but I might have to make some updates if she's thinking that, hey, when I call in, I can just tell you my member ID is 10 and you'll be able to tell me my billing information. Not the case in our scenario. So that is something to be aware of within Access 2007. Tables are really the launch pad for everything else you create in Access. It's best practice to have solid table structures. Once your tables are structured, then you can import your data and make sure that you add your objects then, because everything is based off of the table. The field in the table will be the same field that's in the form, the query, and the report. And if you change that field in the base table, it will have ramifications in those other objects that are based off of that table. Well, this nugget was all about tables. In fact, we talked about creating a table. We created a table in Design View as well as Datasheet View. We made sure to set that primary key so that we can preserve uniqueness in our table. Generally, it's an order ID or some type of number field, because then you can choose auto number as your data type. We took a look at all the data types that exist in the tables. The goal here, of course, is being able to describe the data that can be held within your table. Lastly, we added a couple records and we deleted a couple records, or at least one record. And the point here was, when you delete data, it's gone. It's never going to be the same unless you bring it back from a backed up database. This was our introduction to Access tables, and I hope that it has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.